After learning lessons from the Russian-Ukrainian War, the Chinese army seems to have resumed its quest for rearmament, with more 9mm tanks driving off the production line in the future, pushing for a full-scale conversion of the Chinese Army's heavy synthetic brigades. A video of two 9mm tanks driving out of the park is being circulated on overseas open-source platforms, and since the tanks do not appear to be fitted with skirted or reactive armor, there is a view that the tanks have just rolled off the production line and are ready to be driven to other production areas for the subsequent installation and debugging of equipment. This new video will get a lot of attention from the outside world, mainly because of previous rumors that China had stopped production of the 9mm tank a few years ago and was going to wait until a new, more advanced tank was introduced before considering a full-scale replacement for the tank force. In the news reports over the years, the Chinese army appeared 9mm tanks, indeed, mainly from the previous on the completion of the replacement of a few Landlord Brigade, 99 type, 96 series of tanks, will also often appear in the news reports, and even more than 2 years ago. We can still see some round tanks appeared in the news. Tanks appeared in the news. This undoubtedly makes the 9mm a discontinued speculation, has a higher degree of credibility. Even if the production of 9mm tanks was not completely stopped as claimed, the annual production of this tank should not be very high in the past few years, at least not to the point of full-scale construction, ready to be fully completed in a few years to complete the replacement. The Chinese army has not quickly replaced all the heavily armored synthetic brigades with 9mm tanks, not only because of the changing geopolitical situation, which requires the Chinese army to put more energy into the construction of the Navy and Air Force, resulting in the Chinese army, to a certain extent, slowing down the pace of replacement of the main battle tanks, but also because of the fact that the Chinese army is also exploring the direction of the Army's modernization of the combat. To put it simply, anti-tank missiles, drones and other technologies continue to develop. The development of armored vehicles no longer seem to emphasize the ability to load against the ability, but in the requirements of a stronger mobility and situational awareness capabilities. This has led to the need to continue to retain a large number of heavy tanks, as well as whether it is possible to use cheaper, more convenient mobilization of medium-sized wheeled armored vehicles to meet the operational needs of many national armies, has become an important issue for discussion. After the outbreak of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, this question has been answered, due to drones and other weapons, are more widely used in actual combat. Poor armor protection ability of light and medium armored vehicles on the battlefield survivability is further challenged. The armor is more thick. Survivability of the main battle tanks will still be in the future battlefield to play a key role in the assault operations and other tasks. Continue to play the light and medium armored vehicles. The role of light and medium armored vehicles is irreplaceable. Has been observing the Russian-Ukrainian battlefield situation, absorbing the lessons learned from both sides of the Chinese army, will naturally notice this. Consider accelerating the 9mm tanks and other equipment replacement speed. At least the existing heavy armored synthetic brigade all upgraded to equipment 990-04 and other equipment, dirt brigade, to ensure that when needed, there can be enough. The last thing to add is that the main battlefield is not a war, but the main battlefield is not a war. The last thing to add is that the fact that main battle tanks will still play a role in land warfare does not mean that the Chinese army's development direction of forming medium and light synthetic brigades is wrong. In years of exploration, the Chinese army has also worked out a lot of ways to use medium and light synthetic brigades, how to reasonably allocate combat tasks on the future battlefield, so that the three kinds of synthetic brigades to effectively cooperate. Is the Chinese army is now really exploring the road. With the production of 9mm tanks, the outside world has realized that China is constantly learning lessons from the Russian-Ukrainian war, accelerating the speed of their own combat capabilities. In addition to the new 9mm tanks represented by the exploration of the army troops, reloading, the Chinese army, in Russia and Ukraine after the start of the war to make the most obvious adjustments are two. One is to improve the armored vehicles to deal with the ability of drones, flying bombs and other weapons strikes, and the second is to strengthen the unmanned construction. Let's start with the issue of upgrading armored vehicle protection. Russia and Ukraine have lost a large number of armored vehicles on the battlefield, but the two sides have not had a large-scale tank battle similar to the World War II Battle of Kursk, and most of the armored vehicles on both sides were lost in small-scale armored battles and offensive and defensive battles. The drones that can be artificially manipulated to attack the tank's weak points and the anti-tank missiles that have the ability to attack the top are undoubtedly the main tank killers. In this war, Russian and Ukrainian sides to give the solution is also very unified. Is for the tanks to add a cage-type additional armor, and due to the front-line troops are temporarily installed, both sides of the cage-type additional armor specifications are not uniform. The quality is also good and bad. Some armored vehicles and the addition of the cage-type additional armor is still unable to completely prevent the drone. In October last year, the Western theater of the 15-type light tank retrofitted with cage-type additional armor has been able to cover the entire turret to achieve a tight fit, to ensure that it can be protected against drones and missiles, and appeared in all the 15-type on the installation of the cage-type additional armor as a unified specification. It is possible that the Chinese Army specifically for the development of 15-type light tanks of the standard equipment. This means that the logistics department will have a large number of spare caged add-on armor, so that if the tank is attacked by drones or missiles in real combat, and the add-on armor is more seriously damaged and can no longer function, it can be quickly replaced on the battlefield. The issue of unmanned, the Chinese Army in the application of drones, has been in the forefront of the world, but the Chinese Army before the main advantage is to show the use of large-scale detection and combat unmanned aircraft. After seeing the FPV drones and patrol bombs in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, the Chinese Army has further strengthened the use of these two types of equipment in the grassroots units. There are more and more reports of Chinese Army units training to use drones, and the Chinese Army is not only training how to use drones to fight the enemy, but also exploring ways to avoid enemy drone attacks. What's more, relying on the development of China's military-industrial industry, the Chinese Army has done the same thing with regard to unmanned issues, putting into use unmanned robotic dogs and other unmanned equipment that accompany infantry in combat. Even in some joint exercises with foreign troops, the Chinese Army has been generous to take out these unmanned equipment, to show their own unmanned equipment on the use of the results of the exploration. Admittedly, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict on both sides of the informationization of the combat level, and the US and Chinese armies, there is an obvious gap, but no one can deny that the Russian-Ukrainian conflict has been since the end of World War II. The two sides of the overall level of tactics and technology of the highest level of a local conflict. The war has become a test bed for equipment and tactics of the West and Russia. Through the continuous observation and study of this war, enough to let the Chinese Army, especially the Chinese Army land forces, to find out some of their own deficiencies, and grasp the future of the land forces combat part of the development direction, and then in the military reform has not yet ended, continue to enhance the combat effectiveness, and ultimately find a most suitable for their own military modernization road. The construction of information technology exclusively belongs to their own combat system.